there has been a network created by a few organizations, and they've been working for a couple of years at least. They've been implementing a plan to consolidate the nuclear weapons complex in New Mexico. And just recently, in April, they have released a report describing their activities and their justification, as well as some broader policy recommendations, not all of which are bad, some are quite good. And it basically, the idea of the plan and of the activities leading to the, that lie behind the plan are to shrink the nuclear weapons complex from 8 sites to 3, more or less. The 3 being in what the lead author of the plan calls the Southwest Nuclear Triangle, Los Alamos, Albuquerque, and Amarillo, Texas. The study group is put in a difficult situation by this network, and it's called the Nuclear Weapons Complex Consolidation Network. And the plan that they produced and the other activities which are also going on, which are lobbying, very expensive litigation, organizing in Kansas City, education and outreach in some locations, but not in New Mexico. New Mexico being the target area. And we're mad about the fact that this has been going on for a long time, and no one in New Mexico knows about it. Not even nuclear issue organizations seem to know about it. When we first tried to bring this up for public discussion last fall, when we began to be aware of the full scope of this effort, we ran into the barrier that no one would believe us that this was happening. How could this be happening? How could nuclear organizations in New Mexico be advocating bringing nuclear activities to New Mexico? In April, the report was released, and now it's a little easier to talk about. So now we are. Trish and I were at the press conference releasing the report at the Carnegie Endowment near DuPont Circle in Washington. This situation is not of our making. We hate controversy. I personally hate controversy. And it's a somewhat unprecedented situation because it sets on its end some of the basic understandings of how civil resistance works in this country, how the politics of place and how local people come together to address national issues because of their local impact. And it has serious implications for the future of the state, and it has serious implications for the future of the weapons complex. We believe, which we'll come to later, that concentrating the entire nuclear weapons complex in a poor state with weak civil society institutions, which is fairly corrupt, and considered to be quite dependent on the nuclear weapons complex, could create a sense of dependency on nuclear weapons that would increase congressional deference within Congress to the interests of the nuclear weapons establishment. That establishment is too big right now to be sustainable fiscally in the present climate and at this point in history. What they need is a plan for consolidation that will streamline their operations and put them in a protected situation where they can weather the storms of history and the fiscal problems that this country is facing with the money that we're borrowing right now. This plan, another piece of background, is not very well received in Washington, so that's good. Some people who are very knowledgeable think that it's dead in the water, so not to worry about it. So that's an important perspective, and I don't want to be in a position of advertising something which doesn't have too many legs. On the other hand, it has some links. And today, for example, in Washington, it may be decided whether or not to close the tritium facility at Los Alamos. The nuclear weapons complex managers want to close the tritium facility at Los Alamos because they have multiple tritium facilities and they don't want to maintain them all and they can't afford it. The Los Alamos one is somewhat vestigial and it has a lot of safety problems. We'll come to that later. But the New Mexico delegation has introduced an amendment to the war supplemental funding bill that's moving rapidly through Congress that has a conference agreement may be announced today. A little amendment tucked in there, it has nothing to do with the bill. It says that the NNSA shall not close the Los Alamos tritium facility. And so NNSA wants to close this. And so we're in the position of, I met with a senior person at NNSA and he said, let's go over to the Smithsonian Garden and talk about this. How come we can't do anything? We just want to close it. I heard from somebody in Congress, you're on our side on this. I said, yep, we are. But these consolidation network folks are not. They want to bring all the tritium from Savannah River, which is a much bigger operation than we have here, and bring it here. And to do that, you need a tritium facility here, not just the one we have, but a bigger one, much bigger.
What is tritium?
Tritium. Tritium is is an isotope of hydrogen, and it is used to boost the performance of nuclear weapons primaries. 233 drops of tritiated water, T2O, is enough to contaminate the entire annual flow of the Rio Grande to the drinking water standard. It is an extremely radioactive substance, and it's very biologically active because if it comes into you as water vapor, then it absorbs throughout your body. So that's why the Defense Safety Board is all over Los Alamos for their bad management of what they call the weapons engineering tritium. There are basically 4 things I want to talk about here. Not just a plan, but first the structure that led to a process that included various activities, one of which is the plan. We first became concerned about this. It wasn't a plan, like a piece of paper that we were concerned about it. It was the fact that litigation had been begun in Kansas City to drive the Kansas City Nuclear Weapons Plant to Albuquerque. And as Peter said, and I guess I want to repeat it, the conclusion of the study, the 2-year study, was in place before the study and before the litigation and before the network. This network consists of a few organizations. It's funded by about a dozen foundations, including some large ones, the Ford Foundation, Open Society Institute, George Soros, Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Atlantic Philanthropies, Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, Hewlett Foundation. They're all involved in this project, along with perhaps 10 others. The foundations have come together to form a project called Connect US, which itself is not a foundation and files no papers with the IRS, so it's all quite informal. They operate through the Tides Foundation. One of the features of this project, I'm sorry to say, and it may be a growing trend, is that the structures of it are not exactly accountable. A regular foundation has to file papers with the IRS. Connect Us does not. This means that donors, the identity of donors is anonymous. And that's all great. That's the way it should be in work like ours. But when you have multiple layers, as we do in this case, then the fragile structures of accountability that keep all of us flying straight are challenged.